The first finalist presentation is going to be by Albert Valente, Shubha Srinivasan, Gokun Yildirim, and Kuhn Powers, and it is entitled Direct Mail to Prospects and Email to Current Customers, Managing Multi-Channel Marketing for L'Occitane. Thank you very much, Kuhn.
Thank you, John. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to this marketing science application for L'Occitane. We have a full research team here, Shubha Srinivasan, Albert Valenti from Boston University, Gokun Yildirim from Imperial College, and myself from Northeastern University, to help L'Occitane manage multi-channel marketing. As an overview of this presentation, first I'm going to sketch the problem that the company faces, held by Delphine Fournier, the senior CRM manager of L'Occitane. Next, I'm going to give it to Albert to talk about the model that we use to address this problem, and also the findings that we have for L'Occitane. Then Shubha is going to talk about the field experiment and how we actually implemented the model-based evidence and validated it. Then give it back to me to talk about the transportability for other organizations. And then I'm going to finish with the organizational impact for the company. L'Occitane is well known. It's a multi-channel retailer of well-being and beauty products. Revenues of over €1 billion, present in 90 countries, over 3,000 stores, just like this one, and also a huge online presence. So it's a true multi-channel, multinational retailer with over 8,000 employees. Their typical problem is which customers to target with which marketing tools. Let's hear from Delphine Fournier how she sees the situation at L'Occitane.
Hi everyone, my name is Delphine Fournier. I am CRM Senior Manager at L'Occitane en Provence, and I am very pleased that the work of Professor Srinivasan, Valenti, Yildirim, and Powers was selected as a finalist of the 2018 Gary L. Lillian ISMS-MSI Practice Prize. I would like to take this opportunity to endorse the collaboration of L'Occitane with this team. The approach of modeling the impact of direct mails and emails represents an innovative method. It tackles the problem of assessing marketing action effectiveness across customer segments and countries. We saw the need to advance marketing decision-making with marketing science tools. We wanted to understand the financial impact of marketing actions. Like many other large retailers, L'Occitane spends millions of euros every year on marketing. The optimal allocation of these investments is therefore of high interest to us, since marketing budget decisions impact the bottom line. Our collaboration started with the Wharton Customer Analytics Initiative project in 2015, when we provided the WCAI researchers with data on 4 years of retail and web transactions, marketing views, CRM and eCRM campaigns covering 6 countries, 85,000 customers. The main objective of the project was to analyze marketing actions effectiveness in a multi-channel context, combining country and customer value segmentation.
Merci, Delphine. So the marketing problem L'Occitane faces is the good old which customers to target with which marketing action. In this case, direct mail and email. It's a truly multidimensional problem. So we have thousands of customers across different countries in different channels. And what the L'Occitane used before is best described as trial and error or experience. And their current approach sends their most expensive direct mail to the high-value customers, as very traditional CRM applications would suggest. This leads to very high marketing expenses. And of course, it's based on a very strong assumption, which we visualized here. Direct mail is very costly to produce and to send to customers. Email is much cheaper. So the typical common wisdom tells you to send your more expensive marketing tool to your highest value customers who give you most money. And then email is cheaper, so it's typically spread around all customer segments. So it's not because customers are high value that they're necessarily more responsive to direct mail. So that's a key assumption that may cost the company lots of money that we wanted to test in our application and then on our field experiment. Our project objectives. Number 1, how does email and direct mail responsiveness varies by customer segment, but also by country and by channel. Very important implications for where in the organization's decisions should be made, country level or a global CRM management. To what extent is sales variation really explained by country and customer value segment? Is everything just depending on which kind of customer you are, or is there a big difference from whether you're a customer in the US versus France versus Germany? And then third, very practically, how do we reallocate marketing spending to maximize revenues, giving a fixed budget in this case? So our ultimate goal, of course, is to help L'Occitane by giving them a decision tool to help them determine the allocation of emails and direct mails to send to these different customer segments and across countries. Our conceptual framework is deeper than this, but so we look at marketing actions, direct mail and email, how it affects offline and online sales, to vary by customer value segment and also by the country. In some countries, like in the US, most customers are prospects and typically do not get direct mail. How do we grow the business there is a key challenge also of L'Occitane. How do we address this challenge? Well, for that, I'm going to hand it over to Albert.
Thanks, Con. So, to address these problems that L'Occitane has, we structured our modeling approach in 7 different steps. Now we'll start outlining in a more general way each one of the steps, and then I will get in more in detail in each one of them. So first, we start by valuing at individual customer level their value. And for that, we use the RFMC framework, which stands for recency, frequency, monetary value, and clumpiness. It's an extension of the traditional RFM, which was proposed by Zhang, Braglow, and Small, and they include this additional metric of C that stands for clumpiness, which they define as the degree of nonconformity between equal spacing between purchase instances. Basically, it measures how together are the different purchase instances of the customer. They show that adding this C and the overall RFMC framework is superior in terms of customer evaluation and sales prediction. So during our calibration period, we use the RFMC framework to quantify the customer value at individual level. Next, we segment customers in groups according to this value within each one of our countries. And then we create value segments within countries. Afterwards, we want to see how these different customer groups respond differently to the marketing actions. L'Occitane is using mainly in our period of study exclusively direct mail and email. And for that, we use HLM, or hierarchical linear models, which are basically is an econometric model that is used to assess how variables can vary, their effectiveness can vary at different levels. And in our case, it's going to be at time level, customer value segment level, and country level. Following, we address the question of how much of the sales variation is explained by each one of these 3 same levels of data aggregation. That's important because some of the decisions you can think that can be made like at a general global level by the CRM manager or by a country manager. So we want to see how much is the weight, the relative weight between the sales variation explained by country or by value segments. And for that, we use the cross-random effects models, which are basically designed to examine that. Afterwards, we use our main model, the HLM, to see if it can be a good model to predict future sales. That's important because we want to see if it's good to predict out of sample, our model can be used for out of sample prediction, and would also give us confidence to implement our results into a field experiment, which we eventually did with L'Occitane. Finally, we use also our model, our HLM, for marketing resource allocation, to try to make recommendations to L'Occitane on how they can better use their direct mail and email. So once we presented all these first 6 steps, L'Occitane were interested into validating in a more casual and controlled setting, like a field experiment, which we designed and implemented together with their marketing team. So putting all this together, our framework consists of descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive steps. Our primary data set, as Delphine was saying, it consists of 84,000 customers, which are randomly selected from 6 different Western countries: US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. We have data at individual customer level of every purchase instance, and whether they purchased online in the e-commerce website or offline in the physical store, as well as whether the customer used a discount during this purchase. We also have data at individual customer level of the marketing actions that L'Occitane used to target these customers, which in the period of study, as I was saying, is only direct mail and email. And for these marketing actions, we have data of 2 years, while for sales data, we have 4 years of data. So we use the first 2 years of sales to calibrate our customers and in their values and in the segments, and then we use the subsequent 2 years to estimate our models. So here we show the distribution of the individual customers in each one of these 4 metrics that gives us like their value. You can see that distributions are differently. They have different levels of heterogeneity. For example, recency and clumpiness are more evenly distributed compared to frequency and monetary value that are largely skewed to the right. For example, just pointing out that frequency, most of the customers have 2 or 3 purchase instances during the whole parification period of 2 years, but we have some customers with more than 90 purchase instances during this period. And monetary value is similar. The average monetary value is around 90 euros in the calibration period, but we have customers that spend almost 5,000 euros during these 2 years. So that's important. That leads us to show 2 things. First, these 4 metrics are important for customer evaluation. And next, once we classify customers in the groups, we want to standardize these metrics, as well as use the percentiles of these standardized metrics as starting points for our K-means cluster analysis. So once we've created these value segments within each one of the countries, that yields a result of 6 segments. The first 2 segments, prospects and dormants, are customers that didn't purchase during the calibration period. The first segment, prospects, actually they have never purchased from L'Occitane, while dormants are customers that had purchased from L'Occitane before the calibration period, so more than 2 years ago, but they haven't purchased during these 2 years, so they haven't been dormants for a long period of time. Then the other 4 segments, we label them as non-recent low value and recent low value, the first 2. They have low values, especially of frequency and monetary value, and their main difference is on the recency. The non-recent low value segment purchased a year and a half ago, before the end of the calibration period, while the recent low value just purchased 2 months ago. Then we have the medium value segment, which has average values of the metrics, and the high value segment, which has like especially high values for frequency and monetary value. Also, it's important to note that the sizes of the segments, of the value segments within each one of these countries varies quite a bit. So for example, the US has the largest proportion of prospects, as much as 38%. Dormants is the largest segment for all the countries, but UK, Great Britain has like a larger share with 40%. And then a high value segment, the most valuable customers, is a very small segment, between 1 or 4%, depending on the country. So once we have these value segments and within countries, we want to see whether there are different responsiveness to marketing actions. So I was saying earlier, we use an HLM or hierarchical linear model. I'm not going to get into detail of all the equation, but just to say first that we have 2 equations, one for online sales and another one for offline sales. So we allow these sales to vary at these 3 levels of data aggregation, which are T, that stands for time period, weekly data in our case, I, that is value segment, and J, that is country. Just to point out here that then in this 3rd line, we assess whether email and direct mail varies in each one of these 3 levels of data aggregation. Without getting into all the details of the estimates and the model selection process, here I can say first 2 things. We didn't see that there is synergy between the 2 marketing actions. So when email or direct mail is effective, that is not in all the cases that you're going to see, sending as well the other marketing action doesn't produce an additional increase. That's the first finding. And the second finding is that we see that email effectiveness varies both by country and value segment, while direct mail only varies by value segment. And I'm going to get into more in detail in the next 2 slides about this. So regarding first direct mail, we see that direct mail drives customers to buy offline, to the physical stores. And the same across all 6 countries, all our 6 countries in our database. And it has the same effect, it only drives for prospects. So direct mail is good for customer acquisition across all the countries. And it drives customers only to the physical store. On the other hand, email, it has different effects by country. Here we are just showing US for clarity of exposition, but these effects in the US are pretty similar to the ones in France and in Italy, which are basically email drives customers both to the online website and to the physical stores offline, but depending on the customers. So if for the offline sales, it drives customers almost across all the segments, while it only drives customers to the e-commerce website on the high-value segment customers. Moving to the sales variation, we wanted to examine here whether the sales variation depends on the level of data aggregation. And then we see that for offline sales, the majority of the variance comes from the customer values, as much as 90%. On the other hand, for online sales, a significant proportion, as much as 50%, is explained by country. That has important implications for managers, because if you are just thinking of managing the offline channel, maybe the decisions can take at a global level by the CRM director. While online sales, if it's, for example, L'Occitane, which is currently present in 90 countries, is thinking of expanding to a new country, maybe initially wants to do it with more cheaper operations with only an e-commerce website, understanding the difference between countries, it's a relevant one. Time to explore this a bit further. We examine different factors of why it's driving this, the importance of country. And we found that e-commerce, the penetration of e-commerce into a country is a main factor behind why country matters to explain online sales variation. Next, we move to the prediction. So we use our HLM to predict out-of-sample future sales. And we compare our model with some common benchmarks in the industry. And we see that our HLM model outperforms these benchmarks between 19 and 57%. So as a summary of these findings so far, we see that direct mail effectiveness varies by value segment, but not by country, while email effectiveness varies both by value segment and country. Next, we see that direct mail has own channel effectiveness, so it drives customers to buy offline, but it's only effective for prospects, but across all countries. And finally, email is effective only in 3 countries, France, Italy, and the US, 3 out of our 6 countries, and has, for cross-channel effects, so email driving customers to the offline website, it's to the offline physical stores, it's the same, or it's across the different value segments. While for the own channel, email driving people to buy online is only for the high value segments. So now I'll give the word to Shubha, who is going to explain how these findings can be used for L'Occitane to better allocate their current marketing resources.
Thank you, Albert. So what we next did was to help L'Occitane with the marketing resource reallocation problem of reallocating their direct mail and email, taking into account the effectiveness estimates that we obtained from the hierarchical linear models that take into account customer segments, country, and time effects. Before I get to the resource reallocation, let's take a look at the segment sizes and the current allocations at L'Occitane. When it comes to direct mail, most of the direct mail goes to medium value and the high value customers. So the more expensive marketing action is targeted at the higher value customers. In contrast, for emails are allocated in proportion to the size of the segments. So bigger gets more, smaller gets less when it comes to email. So what we then did was we looked at the relative elasticities that we obtained in the hierarchical linear model of emails and direct mail. We looked at the sizes of the segments. We looked at the number of emails in direct mail and helped L'Occitane with optimal reallocation of the direct mail and email. So when it comes to direct mail, the optimal reallocation would suggest that all of the direct mail goes to prospects and the other customer value segments get no direct mail at all in proportion to the elasticities that we found from the HLM. In contrast, for email, the effective reallocation allocates a greater number of emails to prospects, to non-recent low value, and to high value. And for recent low value, we suggested no emails at all, given what we observed in the HLM model. Next, we wanted to see what would be the financial impact to L'Occitane as a result of this reallocation. And in order to do that, we multiplied the financial contributions by the numbers under the current allocation and compared it with the numbers under the reallocation. And what we find is that the proposed reallocation of direct mail and email for L'Occitane results in a revenue lift of 16% to the company. And given that it's budget neutral, this 16% revenue lift translates to a bottom line impact of 16%, since marketing costs are held constant for this exercise of marketing resource reallocation. Okay? We presented the results of our findings to the L'Occitane senior management team, including the CEO at the Wharton Customer Analytics Symposium in 2016. The CEO found our findings exciting, and he suggested that we go ahead with the field implementation. So I'm now going to walk through the design of the field implementation. The experiment occurred in Italy. L'Occitane wanted to find out what would happen if a customer receives no marketing action, which is why we have cell 1. Cell 1 in the design says this customer gets no email or direct mail. Cell 2, customers get only email. Cell 3 customers get only direct mail. And cell 4 customers get both email and direct mail. So the main objective of the field experiment was to see whether the effectiveness of direct mail and email that we had obtained in the HLM model translate to a controlled causal setting of a field experiment. We were given a budget restriction of 33,000 direct mails. So cell 3 and cell 4 had no more than 33,000 given the budget restriction. There was random assignment to the 4 experimental groups with stratification by customer level. And the reason we used proportionate stratification is to ensure that the representation of the customers in the experiment matched the proportion in the country of Italy. Our sample that we're reporting is of 122,000 customers in Italy. So now I'm going to walk through, this is one of the direct mail campaigns that was sent as part of the field experiment that we ran. The experiment ran between July 2017 and November 2017 in all of Italy. So now I'm going to walk through the field experimental results, starting with the margin impact for the prospects and the dormants. So when we talk about the lift of email, it compares the lift of cell 2, the experimental group versus the control group. When I talk of lift of direct mail, it compares the lift of cell 3 versus cell 1. And the interaction is cell 4 versus cell 1. So turning to the results for prospects and dormants, we find that direct mail is significant for prospects and marginally significant for dormants. So this confirms the finding of our hierarchical linear model, where we found that direct mail was significant only for prospects. Moving on to non-recent low value, recent low value, and medium value, we find that email is significant only for the medium value customers. And this too confirms the finding from our econometric study, where we found that email works better for medium value customers and direct mail works better for acquisition. As far as the high value segment is concerned, we did not see significant effects of email and direct mail for them. As far as the interaction effects, comparing the magnitude of the green bars with the blue and the red bars independently for those cells where it is significant, we found that the interaction effects are not significantly different from the main effect, confirming what was found in the HLM model regarding the absence of synergy between direct mail and email. Then we wanted to see what would be the financial impact of the field experiment, and therefore we combined the contributions that we had obtained from the field experiment, taking into account the effectiveness of email and direct mail, and we find that over the base revenue, by effective resource reallocation of direct mail and email based on our field experimental findings, we would see a lift of 9.5% for L'Occitane, or L'Occitane would see a lift of 9.5% as a result of the findings of the field experiment. Again, since we held marketing costs constant, this 9.5% should translate to a bottom line impact of 9.5%. It's also worth noting that L'Occitane is a billion-dollar company, so should this be implemented chain-wide, we expect L'Occitane to see significant revenue impacts in the hundreds of millions of euros. Now I'm going to share with you a video from Delphine Fournier talking about our field experiment and the value to L'Occitane.
The team presented the analysis and results of their projects at the WCAI Symposium to our top management team. Their analysis, which was very innovative and useful for L'Occitane, addresses some of our main business challenges and directly impacts marketing resource allocation. Their successful application of data analytic tools to address these challenges encouraged us to implement the study findings further in Italy. In 2017, in collaboration with a team of researchers, we successfully ran a field experiment, taking into account the status of the customers and the communication channels preferences. The combination of marketing science tools with experimental data gives us a new perspective in understanding marketing effectiveness and helps us improve our resource allocation. Overall, I would like to thank you, the WCAI team, for this collaboration with L'Occitane, as it helped us tremendously.
Thank you, Delphine, for this wonderful summary of what the project did for L'Occitane and also the field experiment. Now, this problem is not unique to the company. As shown by McKinsey and the Marketing Science Institute, both the challenges and the opportunities faced by L'Occitane and multi-channel management are very common across companies, and there's a lot of rewards to be reaped for getting better in this process. So we really care about the transportability of our results, and we specifically wanted to find evidence of this. So we contacted, again, the Wharton Customers Analytics Initiative for a second data set, and this is a US retailer in the clothing industry. So completely different industry, different country also, but similar data. So we have, again, 2 years of sales data. Direct mail and email are the main marketing actions for about 24,000 customers. And so first we found that applying the modeling steps as outlined by Albert was perfectly feasible for that data set too, no problems. And then in the findings, we again found that own and cross-channel effects depend on this customer value segment. For this particular retailer, it's a different situation, we found slightly different specific coefficients. So for this retailer, direct mail has both own and cross-channel effects, and this is for the dormant segment of customers. Whereas email only has cross-channel effects, so it gets people to get to the physical store of the retailer, and this is for both prospects and dormants. When we apply the same reasoning of relative elasticities to a reallocation for this retailer, we again find a revenue impact this time of 9.3%, so very close in magnitude to the one we found for L'Occitane. As to cultural impact, L'Occitane moved from experience-based to much more evidence-based marketing allocation decisions. This should allow for a long-lasting, profitable outcome, and also an interest in the organization to continue to improve in terms of model and experimenting with new ideas. And of course, the big hero in our story is the redefinition of common wisdom. So do not just assume that high-value customers are also more responsive to your most highly expensive marketing actions. This is an assumption that is very costly and should be verified. Finally, in the words of L'Occitane, the different effectiveness of direct mail and email depending on customer type, that was very surprising to us. Rethinking about this finding, we have a deep and increasing interest in investing in direct mail activities for customer acquisition and inactive customers. So if you are a high-value prospect and you get this direct mail in your mailbox soon, don't be surprised and check it out. To end methodologically, I think this is a prime example of model, experiment. So one of the iterative approaches recommended in the Value of Marketing article in Journal of Marketing 2 years ago. And of course, when you embed this in the decision process of a company, you can get better incrementally in your multi-channel management. Methodologically, this is also the very first time that all of these tools are innovatively combined, to the best of our knowledge, specifically integrating RFMC thinking for customer segmentation with hierarchical linear models, and then also validated in a field experiment. And then, of course, very directly, the financial impact, a revenue lift of 9.5% demonstrated physically in a field experiment, not just by model-based calculations, holding marketing costs constant. So if L'Occitane broadens this out to also budget size decisions, and to across countries allows us to do more experiments and to enrich our model based on those, then we expect the impact to be in hundreds of millions of euros. We thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Hello. This is a great presentation. I liked it a lot. I think it's very straightforward, effective. The financial impact is very salient. I think it will resonate really well with the organization, coming from the practitioner standpoint. I do have one question I want to get your feedback. I think today you see that companies are moving from mass media channel to direct, and within direct you see, from offline to online. Part of it, of course, cost. Part of it is driven by empirical derived marketing response effectiveness. But I think sometimes in doing so, the long-term brand loyalty and the long-term customer relationship might be not fully taken into consideration in that kind of analysis. So how do you think about, for example, in your case, where we are not sending any direct mail to customers at all, mostly prospects, and we have maybe there's a brand impact in the long term that's not fully captured in your model?
That's a good question. So the data set we were provided did not include any brand value metrics, anything about the brand health indicators. But if we had the, if we had such metrics in the data set, we would be, we would be happy to look at the brand value impact as well. So it would be a straightforward, application with different dependent variables, brand value metrics. About the long-term impacts, we can still calculate the long-term effects of direct mail and email actions using the, autoregressive terms, coefficients estimated for each customer groups across countries. But that wouldn't be necessarily, the long-term impact for brand value, but rather for sales. That would be my...
So maybe as one addition to this, so you saw that, which I thought very interesting, that it was only the high-value segment that because of an email actually bought online. And they're also less responsive to direct mail. So that means to me that at least in the short term, right, we don't know how long this, if they do that for a year or two, but then in the short term, those people have a very strong relationship with L'Occitane and are very comfortable being poked by just email and also just buying on the online side. Whereas for the newer customers going to their wonderful brick and mortar stores, that really, this is what direct mail is able to do. It gets prospects and dormants to come into the store, experience the wonderful products that they have to offer, and thus hopefully then in the long term also basically become a customer of L'Occitane.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I share the compliments that you had about the presentation. Very, very nicely done. And Koen, you actually just answered the question that I was going to ask. So now I have to come up with another one. Okay. My question was behavioral interpretations, which you just provided. But I'm curious, and you did say that you did not go there in this presentation. So my question is a little bit unfair, but I'll ask it anyway. But do you know from your result, is this company right spending, overspending, or underspending in marketing overall?
Well, according to, so we looked at whether like models, we just presented like the results of the final model we got. Yeah. So we also tested whether non-linearities should be considered, which we didn't find. So that leads to think that they are close to the current spending, but actually, since they didn't provide us like cost information as well, so we couldn't like really assess that like directly.
All right.
I don't know if you want to complement.
Yeah, I think we tested for nonlinearity, and in all of the cases, the nonlinear term was not significant, suggesting that they were pretty close to optimal.
Okay. Thank you.